Hello, everybody. How you doing? We're in a bit of a heat wave here. Go figure in October. Looks like we're in for another week of 80s temperature. Anyhow, we need some rain, but we're not shoveling snow. Today I'm going to speak on the legal requirement to report the disposition of securities. Now, some people might be saying, well, legality doesn't apply to me, and that's somewhat true. But in this case, whether it applies to you or not, I think you want to report the disposition of securities. So what I'm going to speak about here today is the importance to report the disposition of securities. Keeping in mind, this is about reclaiming securities, presumed abandoned, right? That's what we do, reclaiming securities. So right off the hop here, I'm going to do a screen share of some stuff so you understand where I'm coming from and you can see it in print. The legal requirement to report the disposition of securities, and I'm going to show you what securities are, and you can all do your own homework, through Securities Act, Securities Transfer Act, UCC Article 8, USC 15, stuff like this, securities legislation, whatever country you're in, they're all dealing in securities. And as far as I know, securities and securities, it might have slightly different words and terminologies per country, but they're all the same thing. Like a promissory note, a bond, and bills of exchange are securities. Understand that they are securities. I'm not making it up. So you want to, anyhow, let me carry on here. So I'm just going to start with the screen share then on what is income tax. This is Canada. Irregardless, it's just to show you that there is a legal requirement to report the disposition of securities. These are valuable instruments, right? These are property. In Wonderland, this is the property. Now, right off the bat here, bulletins do not have the force of law, and they don't. The content of this is found in the Income Tax Act. Not exactly word for word here necessarily, but it's in the Income Tax Act. Same as the Treasury Board of Canada. They do what they call Treasury Board circulars, and where they basically are the overseers of they write the law in essence in a roundabout way. So they write a TB circular, and that ends up, you'll find that in the Financial Administration Act, the Canadian Financial Administration Act, for example, like TB Circular 1989-2. It's got a new name now, but that was dealing with respect to what they would accept as a security toward a debt. And the value of these different securities, what they would recognize the value if you want to give them like a promise to pay or a bond, and you get 95% of the value that they would hold as a security that you're going to pay them, whatever the case may be. But anyway, this is an income tax bulletin 479R. The content of this, as I say, is found in the Income Tax Act. And all I'm going to show you here, I'm not going to get into big detail, but this is Income Tax Act. Transactions in securities. Transactions in securities. We're talking about securities. We're not talking about promissory notes. We're not talking about bonds. We're not talking about bills of exchange. We're talking about securities. So those things are securities, but it says securities, right? It doesn't say transactions or promissory notes or bonds or bills of exchange. It's not the language. It's in the words. Choose carefully. So I'll just here, I'm not going to, like I say, go into the full detail. A gain or loss from the disposition of shares or a debt obligation, such as a bond, blah, 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 blah. And this is like, when people were doing the 1099 and in Canada, the T5008, that's kind of what you're doing there is, if the bank, for example, is not going to report that you gave them a security, then you're going to do it for them. This is what I'm talking about here, more or less, but you don't have to be an expert. I'm not suggesting anyone goes down the 1099 or the T5008 path. People have gone to jail. I get that. Better wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Maybe part of that wisdom is, I don't have a clue. You guys are the experts. You do it. I'm just going to give you the facts. I'm going to report the disposition that provides you the facts, and they will do it. Talking to the tax man. Remember, in Canada, the king's the owner. That's his chief accountant, for heaven's sakes, and you're accounting to him because he owns the property. If he owned the property, you wouldn't have to account to the king. How much money was earned or what you received in the form of valuable benefits. Like if you get free parking at work, well, they consider that a benefit, so it's going to be added to your income. If you got a plane ride to go on a trip or a paid vacation by the company, chances are they're going to, depending on the circumstances, but classify that as a benefit, and they're going to add it to your tax liability. All this sort of stuff. Same with securities. The promise to pay worth $500,000. That's a face value of $500,000. That's a $500,000 financial asset. Like you all think a house is an asset, it's worth $500,000. Well, so is that security, a piece of paper. Right. So this is all to do with the disposition of securities, and there is a legal requirement to do that. And you check your own codes because, well, let me just carry on here. So now I'm going to show you securities. First, I'm going to show you, this is Ontario Securities Act, UCC Article 8, the USC 15, different codes, legislations around the planet, you'll find what are, the definitions of a security in where you're at. So yeah, so this is the Securities Act, Province of Ontario, 1990, Chapter S5, blah, blah, blah. Just going to go down here quickly to the main part, which is the security aspect where they define it. Where are we going here? Keep going. Sorry, it's a long scroll. This is not a piece of legislation you want to read. It's huge. Where the heck did it go? Huh. Somebody's getting by it. It's huge. Yeah. Here we go. Security. Security includes any document, instrument, or writing commonly known as a security. This one's interesting. Think registration of live birth. Any document constituting evidence of title to or interest in the capital assets, property, profits, earnings, or royalties of any person or a company. Person. It's not you, of course. A bond, debenture, note, or other evidence of indebtedness, or a share, stock, unit, blah, blah. But there you go. Bond, debenture, note, or other evidence of indebtedness. These are security. Okay, you see it? There it is. These legislations, by the way, for Canada, speaking for Canada, it's probably the same where you're at, but is binding on the Crown. So if it says security is a promissory note, it's a security, it says that it's a security. There's no argument. It's a security, and there's an obligation to report securities. It says that in the code. I got a duty to report securities. This is a security. So stop you sharing that. Go to the Securities Transfer Act. Again, Ontario. UCC Article 8. Securities Transfer Act 2006, Chapter 8, it's Ontario. A couple of definitions here. Oops. First one here, financial asset. Financial asset means, except as otherwise provided in sections 10 to 16, which I'll get into, section 13, a security. So financial asset means, except as otherwise provided down here, a security. Okay, let's go down here to section 13. Bill of exchange, promissory note. A bill of exchange or promissory note to which the Bills of Exchange Act Canada applies is not a security, but is a financial asset if it is held in a securities account. So it's not a security, but it's a financial asset if it's held in a securities account, and a financial asset is a security. Seems like a lot of mumbo jumbo just to come down to the promise to pay, the bill of exchange, and bonds are securities. So there you have it in black and white, that these are securities. And every one of you, whenever you've got a loan, you sign, you put your signature to a promise to pay, a security. But, so that's that. And I'm not going to harp on this. We did, well, I got my notes here. So, get this. For years, I and many people, including many friends, have issued securities in the form of a bill of exchange, a promissory note, and bonds. A bond being a mere promise to pay. We did that with the idea to settle a debt. That's not the proper, as we know that people gone through reclaiming securities know that you don't settle a promise to pay debt with a promise to pay because you're just giving them more money. It's not how you deal with it. Totally incorrect. But anyhow, it's not the proper way to go about it. But we always got a letter back saying it was a worthless piece of paper. But the so-called worthless piece of paper was never returned. They claimed the paper was worthless, yet they kept it. Why would they keep a worthless piece of paper? I don't know. But that would have been a good time for the issuer, the maker of this bill of exchange, promissory note, or bond, to report the disposition of a security. He kept it. I made a security according to this here. I signed a promise to pay to the bank as a security when I got the car loan, when I got the mortgage, blah, blah. You're listening to me, your credit card, all of that stuff. It's a security, and you signed it. But so anyhow, they claimed the paper was worthless, yet they kept it. And that would be a good time then to report the disposition of the security. And none of us did that. Not one of us did that. Reported the disposition of a security. Oh yeah, we'd argue back and forth. Oh, we get a security. It's not a worthless piece of paper and banter back and forth, going nowhere. Income Tax Act says report the disposition of securities. I'm not going to tell you where you can go with this, but Just going to show you the law, the legality, the legal requirement. There's no burden on you. This is quite opposite, but nonetheless. So yeah, that would have been a good time to report the disposition of a security. So that recipient does not get something for nothing. How do you know they're not monetizing these things? I've seen where they monetize these things. Money for nothing. Debt for nothing. But whose credit was it? Whose note was it? Whose signature? Who signed it? There's a potential for large tax liability on the recipient of that security. Potential. We covered the tax liability thing during our 2020 Zoom meetings, Reclaim Your Securities Zoom meetings. I got into that, what the consequences are like. And so just to be clear here, we're talking the disposition of securities. We're not talking the disposition of a promise to pay or a bond or a bill of exchange. We're talking the disposition of securities in the form of, because that's what they're talking about, transactions in securities. So you got to speak the language, or you're going to, or when it comes time to show them law, it says right here that this is a security. So it says to report the disposition of a security, and that's what I'm doing. So here's the thing. If you do not report the disposition of a security, how the heck would they know that you made and signed one and issued one? If you don't report it. Well, you can banter back and forth with the bank or the law firm that you sent them, this piece of paper to, allegedly, so-called whatever, and go around in circles. But that's not how you deal with it. Not only that, but it's also an original issue security, and original issue securities are exempt from levy. They're exempt from tax. So the banks, when you understand the reclaiming securities process, for the banks are presuming your securities abandoned and theirs is original issue. See how they get no tax liability? Because they're presuming theirs is the original issue, not yours, but theirs. Or what happens when you report the disposition of your security to the tax department if they don't want to play ball according to the law? Just saying, negotiating tool. Oh yeah, we held a Reclaim Your Securities Zoom meeting back in 2020, and again last week, because some people missed the significance of reporting the disposition of a security or securities. If you do not report the disposition of the securities, how will anyone know you did that? How can you be a benefactor? The one that funded the loan, the mortgage, or credit card account for their fictional son. How can anyone know you as the source of the credit? The bank with claim to the debt. How can you be anything but a low-life debtor? Just saying. How the heck can the guy who kept the security, claiming it was a worthless piece of paper, how could he possibly have a potential tax liability if you do not report the disposition of a security? So who's the bad guy now? Ignorance, I get it. We didn't know. But who's? Maybe they're not that bad after they're on the other side of the fence. Maybe they're just following our lead, and because of a lack of knowledge on our part, they get advantage. I don't know. So reporting the disposition of securities is saying, reporting the disposition of a security or securities is saying, I did not abandon that security. Or securities, as the case may be, all the way back to your 18th birthday, or whenever you signed that first security, probably a promise to pay. Now you want to know what a security is, and then anything that carries an obligation to pay into the future is a security. Remember, it's all securities futures, such as credit card agreement, loan, a mortgage agreement, and there are more. We had a meeting with private friends last night and talked about that. There's applications for this, applications for that. When you see what's going on, these are securities. Not even going to go down that path. It gets too deep. Not necessary. So anyhow, there's more. But yeah, I think you'd want to know about that. So you know what constitutes a security and when you disposed of one. Just going to pause this for a moment. Get your glass of water. Dry mouth. Dry mouth. So as I say, you don't have to be an expert here to report the disposition of a security. Fact of the matter is, it's not our business. We shouldn't be doing any of this anyhow. But I'm proposing that because of our lack of duty, if you will, to ourselves, our families, to report the disposition of a security, knowingly or unknowingly, whatever, doesn't matter. Now you know. But the failure to report the disposition of securities has removed us from the equation as the bank, the source of the credit. The banks out there, they're leveraging their securities against your securities. So when you give a bank a promise to pay, they leverage the security against that, and then they pretend your security didn't exist. So that makes their security the original issue, which is non-taxable. And I'm not. I got to be honest. I can't say exactly how they're doing the accounting there. I don't know how they're doing the accounting there. But from the security perspective, what I'm saying in all of our Yahoo posts at 600 plus pages lays it out there pretty clear and concise. And so anyway, that's all I had to say, just to talk about the disposition of securities. Once again, it's in our information package. You know, some people are squawking about having to pay for an information package, like people. Billions of people go to work and get paid at the end of the week for an exchange. That's the exchange of this for that. You want some of my property, give me some of your property. That's what it is. That's what it is. And nobody's getting rich here, trust me. But and we can't possibly put all of this on the internet. Not going to happen. And it's love you. Report the disposition of securities. Understand, know what a security is, so you can show them. Yep, this is a security. Okay, great. Yeah, promise to pay is a security. Great. Now, if there's a duty to report the disposition, great. Well, that's what I'm here to do. I don't know how to do it. Here's the facts and the figures. On such and such a day, I got a loan over here. I got a mortgage over here. I got a credit card here, here, and here. Blah 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 blah. And all of these we have agreed or promises. Pardon me, or securities. So I'm reporting that. A little more to it, but that's the general gist. And you don't have to be an expert. Anyhow, love you. God bless. Talk to you soon. Until next time, let God never fails. Keep smiling. And love you. Ciao for now. Just a little addendum here. I put it this way. If someone stole your car and you don't report that it was stolen, was it stolen? Seriously. And with respect to reporting the disposition of securities, I know I talked about Canadian income tax and the Canadian Securities Act and Securities Transfer Act and UCC. As far as I know, every country on the planet, certainly as part of the IMF and the BIS and all that, the BS and the BIS, it's all their transactions, everything is securities. So, and like I say, securities are financial assets, and for sure, there's an obligation to report the transfer of its financial asset. The government wants to know everything that's got values when moved from A to B and B to C, whatever the case may be. So it's applicable as far as I know, and you can check your country, your tax code, and just ask your tax manager to report the disposition of a security and blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, and the other thing is here too, I think it's important, we kind of touched on this last night, that we have this perception that the government people, including the tax manager, are adversary or enemy. Maybe that's because we've been on the debtor, taxpayer, trustee end of the stick because of our failure to report the disposition of security. It's funding the whole basis of the whole system. It's not these corporate legal entities, these fictional beings that are bringing value to the table and funding everything. That's how it looks right now because technically we're not there. So they got to work with what is. And so I propose anyhow that these so-called adversaries, particularly your tax department, as my mentor said, are your friend. They can be your friend. And maybe that starts with doing our duty and reporting the disposition to ourselves and reporting the disposition of securities. That was it. Sorry. Anyway, I had that up there and love you. God bless.